For decades, Cliff Richard stood as one of Britain's most beloved cultural figures, a smiling symbol of optimism whose music bridged generations. His songs played at family gatherings, weddings, and national celebrations, shaping the soundtrack of post-war Britain. To the public, he appeared untouchable, wholesome, and endlessly successful. Yet behind the polished image was a life marked by quiet struggles, emotional sacrifice, and moments of deep vulnerability. Fame gave Cliff admiration, but it also demanded restraint, solitude, and resilience that few could see. As the years passed, the contrast between his public persona and private reality grew sharper. His story, often simplified as one of uninterrupted triumph, is far more complex. It is a tale of reinvention, faith, unfulfilled love, and the emotional toll of living under constant scrutiny. Cliff Richard's life reminds us that even icons carry unseen burdens behind the spotlight. From India to a shattered Britain, Cliff Richard did not begin life amid London's music scene, but far from it in Lucknow, India, where he was born Harry Roger Webb during the final years of British rule. His earliest memories were filled with warmth, color, and a sense of stability that would soon vanish. Political upheaval and the collapse of the British Empire forced his family to leave everything behind and return to England. The journey marked a dramatic shift. Post-war Britain was bleak, constrained by rationing and limited opportunity. Settled in Hertfordshire, the Webb family struggled to adapt, and young Harry felt the loss deeply. The contrast between his early childhood and his new reality created a lasting sense of displacement. That emotional rupture planted a powerful drive within him. Determined not to fade into obscurity, he searched for something that could give him purpose, identity, and a voice that could rise above hardship. Becoming Cliff Richard music became Harry Webb's refuge in rebellion. American rock and roll, pulsing with energy and defiance, offered him a vision of freedom. Inspired by artists like Elvis Presley and Little Richard, he saw a path beyond conformity. By his late teens, he reinvented himself, adopting the name Cliff Richard to project strength, confidence, and permanence. With his band, first known as the Drifters and later the Shadows, he recorded Move It, a song that shattered expectations. Its raw edge and unapologetic sound stood apart from the polite pop dominating British radio. The response was immediate and explosive. Teenagers screamed, fainted, and followed him with devotion previously reserved for American stars. Almost overnight, Cliff Richard became Britain's first true rock and roll idol. He wasn't just successful, he represented a cultural shift, proving Britain could produce its own rebellious musical hero. Faith in the face of fame. At the height of his success, Cliff Richard made a choice that shocked fans and industry insiders alike. During a large evangelical gathering led by Billy Graham, he publicly declared his Christian faith. In an era when pop stars were expected to embody rebellion and excess, this declaration felt radical. Many believed it would end his career. Record executives worried he would alienate his audience, while critics assumed he would retreat from the spotlight entirely. Cliff himself wrestled with the decision, fearing he might have to abandon music to remain true to his beliefs. Instead, he chose a different path. He refused to sacrifice either faith or art, blending them into a new identity. This choice transformed him. The insecurity that once hid behind swagger faded, replaced by a grounded confidence. Cliff remained on the charts, proving authenticity could survive in an industry built on image, love, loss, and personal sacrifice. While his career flourished, Cliff Richard's personal life demanded sacrifices that often went unnoticed. The sudden death of his father when Cliff was only 21 forced him into a role of responsibility, caring for his mother and sisters while navigating fame. Later, watching his mother decline with Alzheimer's was a prolonged emotional trial that deepened his sense of duty, but narrowed his personal freedom. Romantic relationships struggled under the weight of his commitments. One serious relationship ended in heartbreak when Cliff admitted he could not balance marriage with his obligations to family and career. Other romances faded quietly, undone by distance, pressure, and public scrutiny. Cliff accepted these losses with stoicism, believing his path required restraint. While many contemporaries lived openly chaotic lives, he chose discipline. The cost was intimacy and the reward was endurance, even if loneliness often followed him backstage. The love that stayed unspoken. Among all of Cliff Richard's emotional experiences, one relationship left the deepest mark. His bond with Australian singer Olivia Newton-John began as friendship and artistic chemistry, blossoming into something quietly profound. Their voices blended effortlessly, and their connection was evident to anyone who watched them perform. Yet circumstances intervened. Olivia's life was complicated by other relationships, and Cliff, bound by loyalty and personal values, chose silence over pursuit. Years later, he admitted that he had loved her, but by the time he understood his feelings, the moment had passed. Rather than disrupt lives or betray trust, he carried that truth privately. Despite this, their bond endured. They continued collaborating for decades, sharing stages and recording music that carried emotional depth. Their final performance together became a poignant farewell. When Olivia passed away, Cliff described the loss not in dramatic terms but as an absence, a quiet space no song could fill, falling out of favor and rising again. By the mid-1970s, it appeared that Cliff Richard's era had ended. For the first time, he went a full year without a charting single. Critics labeled him outdated, and the music industry shifted its focus to younger acts. Rather than retreat, Cliff reinvented himself. In 1976, he released Devil Woman, a darker, edgier track that surprised listeners and critics alike. The song became a global hit, reintroducing him to a new generation and silencing doubts about his relevance. This resurgence wasn't temporary. Through the 1980s, Cliff continued adapting, releasing albums that balanced modern production with his unmistakable voice. Mistletoe and Wine became a defining holiday anthem, dominating charts and becoming a lasting commercial success. By decade's end, Cliff achieved an unprecedented milestone: #1 singles across 5 consecutive decades, securing his place in British music history. When the industry turned away. Despite his longevity, Cliff Richard faced resistance from the very industry he helped shape. In 1999, he released The Millennium Prayer, a reflective piece blending tradition with melody. Major radio stations declined to play it, dismissing it as irrelevant. Without industry support, the song's success seemed unlikely. Yet fans rallied behind him, purchasing the single in extraordinary numbers. Against expectations, it reached #1, becoming his 14th chart topper 4 decades after his debut. The achievement was symbolic. It demonstrated that public connection mattered more than gatekeeping. Cliff had once again defied predictions, proving resilience could overcome exclusion. The song's success reaffirmed his bond with listeners and highlighted a career built not on trends, but trust. While the rejection stung, the outcome strengthened his belief that authenticity and perseverance could still triumph in a rapidly changing musical landscape. A public ordeal and private pain. In the final chapter of his public life, Cliff Richard faced an ordeal that tested him more than any career setback. In 2014, a police investigation involving historical allegations became the subject of intense media coverage. The way it was reported caused immense distress long before any conclusions were reached. Ultimately, no charges were brought, and the investigation closed without findings against him. However, the emotional toll was severe. Cliff withdrew from public life, struggling with anxiety, illness, and a sense of violation. Later, a court ruled that his privacy had been unjustly compromised, marking a turning point in how unproven allegations are handled by the press. While the ruling brought some vindication, the experience left lasting scars. Cliff spoke openly about the fear that doubt can linger even after clarity is restored, a burden no legal decision can fully erase. Legacy beyond the spotlight. Cliff Richard's life cannot be defined by a single triumph or trial. It is the story of a man who navigated fame with discipline, faith, and remarkable resilience. He sold hundreds of millions of records, shaped British pop culture, and maintained relevance across generations, yet his legacy extends beyond numbers and awards. It lives in his refusal to abandon his values, his quiet sacrifices for family, and his ability to endure when public favor wavered. Cliff Richard survived shifting tastes, personal loss, professional rejection, and public scrutiny with dignity. His journey reveals the cost of longevity in the spotlight and the strength required to remain true amid constant change. In the end, his story is not merely about music, but about perseverance, restraint, and the courage to continue when applause fades.